Let's talk England then with our panel. Lee, I'll start with you. Tuchel arrived to great fanfare, didn't he, a year or so ago as the man they hoped the FA would win the World Cup. He's 4 games in. How do you assess the job he's done so far?
Good question. I don't see a lot of change. I really don't. And I don't want to sit here and be negative at all. I think...
But you're going to be.
Yes, well, I am going to be. Listen, I think, you know, we look at the Southgate era and he got criticised, you know, every single international game for how he set up, players he picked, all the rest of it. And I don't see much change in what Tuchel's done so far. I think, you know, squad that he's picked, I know he's experimenting, but I expected maybe him to come in and really give us something different to go at. You look at the likes of Lee Carter, who came in, had a little spell, and he did something different. He tried different players. He probably tried to be a little bit more attack-minded, and he got shut down because they had that defeat at Wembley. Listen, I just think that Tuchel still finding his feet. I don't know if I wouldn't say he hasn't got the time to do so, but I think he's got to get something going quite quickly, you know, when we're approaching this World Cup. And automatically, I'm looking at some of the things he's looking at, and we're talking about midfield areas. He's talking about John Stones maybe coming into a midfield area. I feel like we're going back and we're doing a similar sort of thing to what Gareth's done, really. And that's what frustrates me, because we've got so many world-class players, I feel, in that forward area that we could highlight. And we're now looking at a defender stepping into midfield when we have the likes of Declan Rice, who's played there for quite some time at West Ham. I know he plays in a different position for Arsenal. You know, we've got the likes of Bellingham. I think you start thinking about changing and altering that midfield area, automatically I'm feeling that's a bit of a negative step back for us. We've got so many exciting players in that front area that it's so hard to pick. It really is. You know, we know that Harry Kane's going to play majority of minutes because he's a leader, he scores the goals, his numbers are off the chart. But he needs that supplying behind. But I just feel that the way things are going, I feel like we're just stepping back into Gareth's shoes. I really do. I really do. And it frustrates me from an England fan point of view, is that if there was a real massive difference in what he's doing, then I could go, you know what, I can see signs in where England are going to go, and I think we might have a chance going into this World Cup. But at the moment, I don't. I feel it's a little bit negative.
I mean, I guess, you know, as we compare the two here, Tommy, you know, there's not an awful lot of change here, as Lee points out there. Goals per game pretty much the same. Possession's a bit more, England seeing more of the ball, but then you've got to bear in mind that the teams they've played over the last 4 matches. High turnovers per game more, I suppose, so winning the ball in the opposition's final third a bit more. But I mean, have you seen much difference? Were you expecting more in these early days of Tuchel?
Well, I think from a stats point of view, you look at the screen there, it's very similar, but it's very early days for Thomas Tuchel. The problem I find is, you know, Lee's just mentioned there about there's an element of him sort of experimenting a little bit. I don't think he's got the time, Jules. I really don't. You know, we're heading into a World Cup in the summer. I feel like he needs to really nail down what his style is, what his formation's going to be, what his best team is. And I think if you were to hand on heart ask him, he wouldn't know himself. It seems as though he's still sort of experimenting, as Lee said. But like I say, I just don't think he's got the time to do that. He needs to nail down exactly what he wants to do. And listen, maybe the fact that he's done all of his work domestically is hampering him a little bit, because he strikes me as the type of person, Thomas Tuchel, who is hands-on. He wants to be with the players. He wants to sort of coach them how he wants to do that. Of course, when you're an international manager, you don't get the time to do that. You see your players 3, 4, you know, games at best at different stages of the season. And it seems to me like he's finding that bit tough, that transition of going from club to international level. But
also, I suppose, talking about this, trying to nail down his best team, you know, with a World Cup in theory less than a year away. But what's he meant to do when Palmer's out, Saka's out, Bellingham's out, Wharton's out, Stones dropped out yesterday, whenever it was? I mean, how can he put out his best team when he's having to add 5 or 6?
An issue, but again, we can get all worked up. When his form in the qualifiers came up, they're 9 points out of 9. Sometimes we've got to slow down a little bit. It's very, very early days. But when you are losing a friendly the way they did against Senegal, then you start to ask those questions, because, again, the level they've had to play so far in those qualifying games hasn't been great. So, yeah, you're expecting him. He said he was going to come in, free-flowing, attacking football, take the pressure from the players, allow them to play like they play for their clubs. And we just haven't seen that so far. So, for me, it's about how quickly can he get the players that might have to step in now for the short term while the other players are not available to him. but it's an opportunity for them as well to come in and play for England with that freedom, which us as England fans want to see week in, week out when they do have those international breaks.
They've got an overload of exciting talent though in that forward area. So I mean, I know there's lots of players that dropped out, and I know that he wants to get nailed down exactly what sort of team he actually wants, but. Listen, it's going to change throughout the year, isn't it? For sure. You know, this is a good opportunity for some of these players that have been drafted in or were on the sort of fringes of actually getting into Tuchel's plans. Is that this is their opportunity now to really go and shine. I'll tell you, I'm absolutely gobsmacked that's not involved. Is Grealish?
Well, I want to come to that.
Yeah.
You won't be surprised to hear that I definitely want to talk about Jack Grealish. Yeah, we will come to that. But you two have hogged it. We need to speak to the former Scotland international, Jamie Mackie, and see what he thinks. Always giving me the evils there.
It was a good point last night. That's what I think.
It was a good point.
It was a good point.
Yeah.
Is that what we're going on to?
Well, we'll come to that.
It's more interesting than this chat now, I think. They've covered all bases, George.
Grealish will come to, but I mean, you talk about sort of the midfield, which is a big area of contention at the moment, and you know, injuries, etc., people's out of form, whatever. How big an opportunity could this be for Elliot Anderson? We talk about Rice and Bellingham. We think we've all set that they're two of the three. Could this be Anderson's chance to shine?
Yeah, amazing opportunity. I think that these opportunities come up and it's your chance when we talk about a Bellingham, we talk about a Rice. They're almost nailed on, aren't they? Well, they are nailed on to play, I'd say, in anyone's team. So I think that for him to have an opportunity while one of them's out and him to play, for one thing I'd say is he definitely deserves it. I think he's a brilliant talent and I think he's shown that. I think Newcastle clearly... It wasn't a decision on how good he is that he's left. It was because of the rules now, and they were gutted to lose him, and that says it all about him. But look at his vision, brilliant pass of the ball. But not only that, he can get up and down. I mean, when we talk about the position that's probably most key for us, though, I feel that he might be a bit better, kind of the other side if they're playing a three of a sitter, and I think that's probably the biggest concern. I mean, look at that pass. The quality that he's got is incredible, and how mobile he is as well, competitive. I think he's a brilliant talent, and I'm glad he's getting his chance. But I don't think that's necessarily the type of player that's the problem. I think it's the one that sits, and that's so pivotal for any side, but particularly with the attacking quality that England have got at their disposal now. I think having that kind of linchpin at centre midfielder, I personally think Declan Rice can do it, and I think that he's good enough to adapt his game. And people say, for Arsenal, perhaps he plays more like an 8 and he likes to score a goal. I just think that he's good enough to be told that instruction that for England you might have to be a little bit more rigid and stay in front of the back four because there's so much attacking quality in front of you. You need that guy to sit.
Well, why can't he still do that? That's the thing. That's why I say, you know, you look at comparing to Rodri. I'm not saying that he's the same level, but Rodri does the same thing for Manchester City, doesn't he? He's a sitter and he can go and join in. Yeah. I think at times it's almost like you're playing in that position. You're a robot. I've never thought that. You've got to have your own instincts, haven't you? You've got to have an understanding with your midfield partnerships in there. And that's where I think that Declan can play that role. No doubt can play that role.
I just think, again, like we spoke off earlier about Declan Rice's position for Arsenal. He's obviously done some good work as a number 8. And I just think that the difference of playing for your team week in, week out in that number 8 role and playing some of your best football to then go to England and perhaps move position. Yes, we've all been players, we can all play in different positions, but when you do your best work in a certain area of the pitch, I think it'd be silly to take them away from that when they go with England. I really do believe that.
I get that. The trouble you've got with that is who plays there. And I'm saying he's that good. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's the best option. If you haven't got a defined number 6 who's best in the world, we're talking Casado-type player. If we haven't got that, we've got to find the next best option to do that. And I'm thinking you have to give a Rice that responsibility to say, I know it's not what you do week in, week out, but you're good enough.
Well, it's interesting as well, isn't it, that Tuchel's come out and said about John Stones, perhaps even going in there. I mean, that says it all, really, in terms of the lack of that type number 6 type player, that profile of a Rodri, like Lee just said then, is the sort of player to break things up and give things to the people further up the pitch, the likes of Cole Palmer, you know, them types of players.
But if it weren't for injuries, isn't the answer for that position staring in the face Adam Wharton?
Again, I think with what Rice has done in that position for the last 7 or 8 years, I still think he's the one with the experience of the big games, the tournament football, Champions League football with Arsenal. He is a better option there than anyone because ultimately we probably have better number 8s available to us. So you've got to have him in the team with his experience, his quality from set pieces, which again we didn't even use in the last tournament. You watch him doing it week in, week out for Arsenal. He's the one that has to be in the team and think the way he finds himself in the team for the benefit of the actual collective is in that sitting.
Okay, so if he's the 6 and Bellingham's the 10, then who's the 8 for you? 6 players to every squad.
Yeah, I think it's just the hope as an England fan, like Hendo mentions, you just want that excitement, and we feel like we made a change in the summer because it almost got a little bit stale. It was the same things. We couldn't quite get over the line and win the tournament when I think we all felt we had enough quality to win those tournaments. But yeah, you mentioned those names. They're world-class players, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Losing them and not having them available is...
6, 8, 10. I mean, it's one of them, isn't it? You're throwing balls up your cane. Eze, you could say Cole Palmer, you could say Foden. And this is where, this is where it's down to them more attack-minded, influential players to really go and put on a show and say, I want that 10 shirt. Because at the moment, I've always been a big fan of Eze. I think he can change a game very quickly. And I think with the way that England play, with probably a bit more direct wingers, I think that little bit of flair in there and someone who's going to get on the ball and someone's going to win a challenge or get a foul on the edge of the box and pick that pass through to Harry Kane. Because I think sometimes he comes under so much scrutiny, Harry Kane, but doesn't always get supplied.
I think part of the problem's been how you said it there, Jules, that you've got a 6, an 8, a 10. I mean, everyone makes up all these crazy formations. I don't know what that one was, actually, to be honest. Just the straight... strong spine, that. Really strong spine.
Numbers out there. Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? If they play in the group stage, how many times have we seen it that you can go... It's almost like you could throw everyone on the pitch and they're going to win the game most... It's more when you come up into the semi-finals, you're going to have to play something a bit different. You might have to play the 2 sitting with a 1 in front, or... I really like the 1 sitting with the 2 8s because there's so many good players in that option who can both do exactly what Hender said, get up and back. Like, you're playing for England. You can't just play and sit when you haven't got the ball. If they come up against the France or Spain, you've got to play a different way to when you might play against, with all due respect, someone in a qualifying game.
Well, today would be a perfect scenario, wouldn't it, to try out, Declan and Anderson maybe, that probably play 2 8s. But as you said, if you want to play a Stones in there when you're playing against a France or a Spain, totally understand that, because you know that we have to defend gamely. They've got big players that can punish you. But on the other side of it, we've got players that can punish, and that's where I think in these games, this is why I don't feel that we blow teams away enough. I know they sit back and make it hard, but you need special players that can certainly unlock these defences.